The Cerberus Affair. Written by Katie Merchant. Edited by Ada Rigby. Typhus and Echidna were at it again. The promised lovers found each other, their cries of passion drowning out an already stormy night. The monstrous couple were too preoccupied to see Zeus sneaking into their chambers, blade ready for his biggest fear. When he pounced upon Typhus, the lovers split. Echidna to the east, Typhus to the west. Zeus followed Typhus. Echidna did not return. Hera stood in the chamber, fuming. He had spent a week with another goddess and went off on a hunt instead of dealing with her emotions. Here she was, staring after Zeus as he chased a monster out of a cave and down the mountainside. Spite led her here, and she felt it would follow her out. A soft chirp in a dark nook changed that as fear threatened to choke her. A short investigation led her to a small nest of leaves, in the corner of which sat an infant, begat by the monstrous parents. The offspring had the head of a serpent and the body of a mutt. It was covered in scales that glimmered in the low starlight, and she recoiled as the fanged mouth yawned and tiny talons stretched towards her in comfort. Hera contended with herself. Its parents may be monsters, but she could tame it. No child deserved to starve, whether it be beast or man. Carefully, she wrapped the infant and took it home to nurture it. When Zeus returned, successful in his domination over Typhus, the sight of the creation left behind by what he had just bested incensed him anew. Zeus cornered the beast, ignoring Hera's pleas, and chopped off its head. "That's your mess for bringing it here. You clean that up," Zeus commanded, before she could speak. He then left, off to enjoy the feast following his labor. Hera openly wept. The head squirmed beneath her, turning her cries into a howl of disbelief. She leapt off the bed and stumbled back into the core part of the beast, which was wandering around headless. 3 nubs grew from its neck. The serpents' heads, which now there were 4, all squalled in terror as the 2 bodies flailed about, the noise getting lost in the lament of Echidna. After an hour of terrible thrashing, there were 2 babies, each of which would not leave her. They cuddled on either side of her and fell asleep. It stormed for over a month. The weather and Zeus's wanderings gave Hera time to hide the infants. The 2 demanded more than she could care for alone, and the one with the 3 heads had the appetite to match. When the rumor hit her ears Zeus was returning home, Hera slipped out, using the few days to hide her clutch. The monotone dread of the underworld didn't bother Hera. She navigated the gatekeeper and crept through the caverns until she arrived at Hades' chambers. A frown melted down his face as he met her with his usual malice. Yet he humored her. He let her explain about Typhus, Echidna, and more. The hard lines around his eyes grew soft as she explained all the ways she combated her husband in the shadows. Wetness hit Hades' hand as the serpent with 3 heads darted out from beneath Hera's robe and licked his fingers. Hades' mouth fell open to protest, but Hera put a finger up to his lips. "Please?" she asked. He nodded. She leaned up to give him a peck on the cheek, and in a flash she was out the door. Gone. Off to move the sibling to the human world. Hera breathed easy, knowing Hades was in control. Hades breathed metaphorical fire at the impertinence of youth and his unexpected chore. He restrained himself from harming the thrice demented serpent. His slippers went first. The remains of the tattered fabric tossed about his chambers like confetti. He added a ball and new slippers to the list of ever-growing supplies needed for his new companion as he occupied its mouths with bones. Hades had meetings to attend. This new life would have to become an unexpected tag-along with how little time he was given to prepare for its arrival. While Hades had been distracted by his slippers, the beast had scarfed down his breakfast and slurped down his tea. Hades sat down in defeat with the morning tablet, tried to catch up on the news, but was stopped by a tongue on his cheek. "Menace," he said, getting down on his knees to pay the animal attention. The hope was to wear it out before they needed to sit for a long time. He found it impossible not to smile as the beast bounded and played with him. The sundial indicated it was time to leave, so he left the beast on a mat in the corner. He left the room to change, and had turned the corner to collect the serpent to go, when a loud crash thundered across the floor. The ethereal wisps of his specially tanked ghost fish dissipated into the air before his eyes. The disappointed hunter was covered in glass. Hades picked him up carefully and swaddled him in the softest blanket he could find. He then set some minions about, setting the place straight, and left with a grouchy constitution, carrying the beast like a babe to his waiting chariot. The creature loved it and cuddled closer into him. The beast tickled a soft spot in the god. He wondered how large it would grow, how trainable it was, and how well it would stay loyal. After his brother had tried to decapitate it, Hades speculated whether the thing held resentment for the golden god. Recalling back to his ever-dead fish, he requested they stop by the market to pick food up the monsterling could actually eat. Even from the swaddle, the beast proved difficult to hold. The smell of the ocean bounty too much to bear. It fled from his grasp and jumped directly into an oversized barrel of fish, which Hades happily purchased. It did bother the god how people backed away in fear and disgust at the appearance of the animal as they walked through the center. He always tried his best to be easygoing because, no matter what, he would be meeting these people again in some capacity. The serpent's image scared people away, its exuberance for life perceived as a threat, not as youthful vigor. More trusted, more approachable, less shunned. Hades found it difficult to maintain his composure as people took obvious offense to his pet. Lizards were off-putting to humans. If a puppy were walking down the street and jumping in barrels of fish, people may ask him to rein the mutt in, but they would also laugh. As the barrel of fish and sundry goods were moved onto the chariot by his minions, Hades couldn't help but wonder about the 3 viper heads, now larger and heavier than before, all tucked around his neck for a snooze. Would they be persecuted less if they looked like a dog? He patted the problem child, comforting them as they comforted him as they trundled down the road. The innocence of the small thing pulled at Hades' fiery heartstrings. He wanted to do what he could to keep the new life safe. As the chariot stopped before the Fates' rendezvous spot, a secluded mountain overlook, he hoped they might have the answer for his scaly friend. They met him with great solemnity. The 3 goddesses had requested the meeting with him the day prior, and he had no idea what to expect. When they needed to say something, it was rarely ever good. However, he wasn't shocked by the lack of greeting, nor the way they jumped into their weaved rhyme. Sickness, a large wave, followed Typhon's demise. And what's coming next will give you a surprise. You'll need extra helpers to tend the river's mouth. For all the souls traveling south, the gods' blood rained down on Greece, bringing plague, ruin, and nothing but grief that will extend to you, dear Hades, if you do not help with aid and relief. The Fates rotated, speaking between their lines, while they fussed about him and his new charge. "How am I supposed to fix this issue?" Hades asked, frustrated about the extra work, but thankful for the tip so he could work on the problem. No one liked to make more work in life. Asclepius will do most of the work if you approach him correctly, one of the sisters nudged Hades in the ribs, and they all began to twinkle as if they were about to dive between reality's fabric. Before you go, he pointed to the lizard that had been sleeping so contentedly on his chest. Thank you for letting me know. You didn't have to. Do you know how I could change this beast so he looks more like a dog? The three women cooed over the little scaly body. Each scratched a scaly chin as they considered the question. The shortest of the three snapped her fingers. Arachne can sort through your murk. Just present yourself directly. The old women laughed and sparkled out of sight, leaving nothing but a few specks of twinkling dust, and a whisper in Hades' ear. Asclepius will help you quick, or your afterlife will be spent on your ship. He growled and kicked his legs from the bench he was sitting on, then added the large task to his list of things to care for. His noise woke the lizard, who stretched across his chest and licked his cheek in welcome. Asclepius hated Hades. His whole goal was to try and keep souls away from Hades as long as possible. On the way to see the man who liked to cheat death, Hades picked up a nice bottle of wine to try and appeal to Asclepius's better nature. The wizened man glared as his servant ran away from Hades, shaking. Asclepius opened the door further to properly greet the gloomy god, and when he did, the small beast took a large wiggly leap out of Hades' arms and knocked over the medicine man. The hells! Asclepius cried. A rare visit, I know. I come to you on a matter promised by the fates. Hades reached a hand down to Asclepius, who recoiled into the ground from death's palm. Not that kind of meeting. Hades replied to the terror by leaving the man on the ground. He placed the bottle of wine on his chest and finished entering the home. The fates say that Zeus's success in slaying Typhoon will lead to the underworld being flooded by souls. Hades took a seat on Asclepius's lounge and pulled his rambunctious friend into his lap after wresting a now-ruined pillow from the viper's middlemost mouth. Asclepius pulled himself up, jaw wide. He tried to order his servant to pour the wine, but they had run after seeing Hades at the door. After no response, and a large sigh, Asclepius vanished and reappeared with two beautiful goblets. He extended a glass to Hades first, who accepted the drink with grace. Once the medicine man was seated, he recounted all the details from the fates. After the glasses were empty, and the prose conveyed to its fullest, both god and man sat in agitation, wondering how to fix their oncoming issue. Why are you helping? Asclepius wondered, as Hades tried not to roll his eyes and failed. Business is good. No one wants it so good that there is no time for self. He looked down at the empty glass and watched Asclepius nod in the background. His face paled spectacularly. I've had an idea for some time on how to create an antivenom, but I would need source material from Typhoon to work with. That is the only reason I could think the fates would send you here. Asclepius shook his head in disbelief. His worried tone hit a bell in the god's head. Hades stopped petting the smooth scales of the animal on his lap and looked the center viper directly in the face, before looking at Asclepius. Will direct offspring work? Hades asked, holding up his hand that had the left head nibbling more than playfully. That is the son of Typhoon? Asclepius surmised. Nostrils flared. According to Hera, Hades replied, tilting his glass for a refill. Asclepius obliged, and Hades told all he knew of the serpent's recent origins. The medicine man disappeared from the room and returned with a glass vial, metal extractor tool, and gauze. Can you keep him calm? Asclepius asked, approaching both with sweat beating down his face. Hades transferred the animal under one of his arms while holding the viper's neck still and mouth wide open. A bite would sting, but not kill Hades. The procedure was over quickly, and by the time the little beast was calm again, a fang with 3 tips was growing where the first had been removed. Hades put a fish in each of its mouths, and it seemed happy enough with the trade. The god of the underworld couldn't help but notice the dazzling display of prismatic colors that reflected off the lizard's scales. "Have you named this fine specimen yet?" Asclepius tried to make small talk as he tucked the fang away to be processed. The potential cure formulating in the back of his mind, with such a serendipitous puzzle piece falling into his lap. "Not yet. I keep seeing the speckles on his scales and think Cerberus, but I don't know if it's fitting for such a noble beast." Hades resumed, petting a spot that was clearly well loved by the creature, as it tapped its foot in contentedness. "I think Cerberus is perfect," Asclepius stated, taken aback by the afternoon's encounter. The way Cerberus interacted with Hades was more in the manner of a dog than monster, and a benign name like Spot was humorous. Asclepius had not expected such a sweet notion to come from one like Hades. Why would you keep and not just dispense of Cerberus? What made his care special? Asclepius asked, not understanding the depth of the question as he walked the god to the door. Hera's silhouette haunted Hades' mind's eye, but he looked down into all 6 eyes of the slobbery lizard. Just because the parent is an issue doesn't mean the babe carries the same evil. Why not let the little life try? Hades felt lame as the words left his mouth. Asclepius looked the god up from head to toe with his shoulders holding more respect than disgust. "We're off to see Arachne next. I'm hopeful she can make him look—" Hades struggled for the words and waved a nonchalant hand. "More like a dog. The snake part scares people. I think the change in shape might be better for him in the long run, and I would like him to last with how his company is growing on me. If his fang works, you'll be sure to see a change in artwork to include him. Perception is part of medicine. Not all is as it seems, and he may be the most accurate reminder of that." Asclepius drummed his fingers on the door, lost in thought. Hades turned to leave. "Oh, when you visit Arachne, can you please thank her for me? The last shipment of gauze she produced was exemplary. I need more." Before Hades could respond, the door was shut behind him. Hades allowed Cerberus to relieve himself right next to Asclepius's front steps before moving along to the weaver's domicile. Her sharp eyes were quick to answer the door, and her knife-like tongue made Hades want to go home. "You really need to speak to someone about the lighting in your place," Arachne stated while bowing the god in. "The sun would really help with your complexion." She touched a finger to her cheek. "To what do I owe the honor?" Cerberus bounded in, and Hades pointed to his charge. "Never took you for the pet type." Arachne shot back as she returned to her loom. Wood clacked against wood, and the hushed singing of thread filled the room as she pulled hundreds of fibers into one to tell a story. "Never knew you would open the door if I came knocking." "Most hide." Hades shrugged and smiled. Arachne laughed, a crystalline note quickly replaced by wood slapping wood. "So what does the lizard need that I can help with?" Arachne asked as Hades peeked around the bottom of the loom to see a star-strewn pattern depicting the Cyclops terrorizing a town. He peered closer and noticed Arachne had managed to include herself working from her loom deep in the background of the weave. The woman had mastered the strangest form of eternity. Cerberus sniffed at the spider-like woman, and Hades straightened up. "I would like to change him into a dog." Hades wrung his hands before flattening his robes. "Why would you ever want to disguise such a gorgeous beast?" Arachne ran a careful finger down the right head's nose. "Hera and her thousands of prospects," Hades cursed under his breath. Arachne's head tilted, but she missed the words while tending to the happy lizard. Arachne returned to her loom. Hades told her about his long morning chasing Cerberus after Hera dropped him on his doorstep, mingling with the afternoon's errands. Arachne giggled her way through his treatment of Asclepius, but gave the appropriate amount of awe for the potential chance cure. "I think people would find him more approachable as a pooch, and so far he has been a very good boy. Plus, I don't think Zeus would hurt a dog. Hades' hands were out like the scales of justice. He should have said less likely. Arachne's magic was in textiles, in bringing forth truth on cloth, not in transmogrification. She wondered if Hades himself could work the magic if he thought it were the truth. He had power, and she knew he rarely touched his potential. The fates wouldn't send him here on a hunch. Arachne wondered if he really understood himself and immediately stopped work on her large project, knowing what to do. Arachne disappeared behind a wall and reappeared with a measuring tape. She began to worry about the animal, measuring from spine to tail, from neck to shoulder. Asclepius wanted me to pass along that the gauze that you made him was exemplary, and he needs more. I wanted to be sure to mention that before I forgot, Hades said while she worked through some basic math in her head. That's always nice to hear, Arachne said. I'll add it to the list. She began to disappear around the corner again. Wait here for a little bit. They did. The longer they waited, the more impatient Hades found himself. Mischief was all the three-headed beast was capable of. The worry around his Adam's apple became hard to choke down after Cerberus became overzealous. He was too young to sit around, and investigative wiggles took him all about the space. Cerberus nearly ate one of Arachne's houseplants. The grand tapestries that lined the walls did not remain on the walls. Hades growled to keep Cerberus from touching the loom. All three heads turned to attention and came running, but didn't stop at him. A ball of yarn became their target, and the lizard quickly became entangled. Hades figured that was much better than the destruction of the room, and left the youngling to its own devices. A similar but much faster tapping ended from the other room, and Arachne appeared with 3 collars and a smile on her face. With a pair of shears, she freed Cerberus. Bits of fluff flew in every direction as he ran free. Sorry about your room. And the yarn. Hades rubbed his face. I can spin the yarn new later. And while I tend to this little devil, you can go hang up what fell. Arachne spoke with grace, and Hades was happy to oblige. By the time he was done, Cerberus had his back on the floor, all 4 legs up as the woman gave him the best tummy rubs. Hades approached, and she stood, all 3 heads tilted looking for their pets. Arachne placed the collars in Hades' hands. These should change his appearance, as long as you believe he will look like a dog. Arachne's cool tone shooed him forward, and he found himself kneeling before the serpent. Of course it'll work. You're clearly a dog, Hades stated, as he secured the first buckle and looked back to see the head of a mighty black dog where a viper had been before. The way his fur caught the light made him look smooth. Zeus himself would call the hound handsome. Hades clicked on each collar, inspecting the change of each head in delight. By the time he was done, anyone would be convinced that a 3-headed dog sat before them. The only part of the serpent that remained was the tail, still the color of meteorite that flashed in the sunlight. Fearsome, Arachne smiled. Glad her plan worked. The dog looked like he was designed by Death himself. The red, glowing eyes that perched on the muscled but toned body looked natural next to the gaunt god. What do I owe you? Hades asked Arachne before calling Cerberus, who was already catching on to his name. She playfully put a finger to her lips. 3 favors. The fingers left her lips and represented the figure. 1 for each head when I choose. Hades nodded and tried not to think about what the future would hold, but instead focused on his perfect furry friend, who was almost at the door. Thank you, Hades said, as he chased the dog to the chariot, smiling as Cerberus cuddled into his chest. Thank you so much for listening to The Cerberus Affair by K.D. Merchant, read to you by K.D. Merchant, and a special thanks to Ada Rigby for editing this special episode. If you've liked what you've heard so far, Please be sure to like and subscribe so you can hear what comes in the future. Thanks so much. Take care.